It's the 2022 World Cup. It's Netherlands players. Hello and welcome to the International Soccer Preview by Soccerphiles Canada. I'm Kevin, and today we are continuing our look at the squads for the 2022 World Cup. And today we focus on Netherlands. So for those looking for a quick version of this, you can skip to near the end of the mediacast, the last 4 or 5 minutes where we summarize the likely starters. And just prior to that, with about, I'd say, 15 minutes remaining, we'll have some discussion on the squad, the main issues, how we see their overall strength and what they look like going into the Cup, as well as some of the key players to look out for or key issues. We'll put those times in the show notes, and we'll also be editing this mediacast into a shorter version for those who are just looking for an overview. So for those looking for a deeper dive, we go through the players to explain why we think they are candidates, and we give some information on their history and their standing with the squad. So the way we do this is by first organizing the players into their designated positions. We should note that these are a bit artificial because players don't always play in the position they're coded for, but it's nevertheless a good way to organize the discussion. And then we go through the players and share some of the data we've collected in our files. And using that data, we try to predict how likely the player is to make the team. And that's based mostly on their recent participation, but a couple of other factors are considered too. We categorize them into definite, likely, possible but unlikely, seems to be off the squad. And we also have a couple of categories for players who are recently retired, notable absences, we call that one. And we make a note of any players who are currently injured. So we'll also try to determine which players will be starters and which will be substitutes. And for those following on YouTube, we run a very simple graphic where we list the names, and you can actually see the players' names and how they're spelled, and how badly we mispronounce some of them. And it's the same broadcast for the podcast version. So we're going to try to repeat the names a few times to help listeners familiarize themselves with the players' names so that you'll know who they are when they step onto the field. And that's as much as we can do at this point. But as the rosters are being published, we will do an update episode. That will be essentially going over our predictions, updating them based on the games that they played between now and then, and revealing which players were selected. There may be a preliminary and a final squad. So keep your eye out for that. That'll probably be in early to mid-November. All right, on with the show. So we are going to begin by taking a look at takeaways from the previous podcast. So for European teams, we did an kind of a groups podcast for the groups in Euro 2021. And Euro 2020, actually, it was called, but it took place in 2021. And we did kind of a preview of the teams there. So we haven't done a players podcast for Netherlands, but we did do kind of a team a podcast on their team. So the takeaways from that podcast were basically, well, they were kind of dissatisfied. I didn't hear a lot about this, but I heard a podcast from the Netherlands shortly before the Cup. And they were saying that fans were dissatisfied with manager Frank Boer, the lineups he was using and the players he was choosing. I'm not sure if that disunity was on the team, whether the players were dissatisfied with the manager, but it's kind of an ongoing problem for the Netherlands, kind of disunity on the team. So sometimes due to egos or sometimes due to issues, whatever it is, when the team comes together, They can be quite strong, but sometimes they're fractured by disunity. So that seems to have been the case, because they did fire Frank Boer. So sorry, they did fire Frank Boer, and they got a new manager, and that new manager is Louis van Gaal. So we'll take a look at those when we get to the squad. So we will take a look at the lineups next, the formations that they used for recent games. By the way, we'll come back to those issues at the end of the podcast. Formations for recent games. So in the Euro Cup, it was a very steady formation. They used the same one for all games. That's a 3-4-1-2. So that's three central defenders, really, and four midfielders, and one maybe second striker or attacking midfielder, and two forwards. Of course, Frank de Boer, that was Frank de Boer's lineup for the Euro Cup, and they weren't as successful as they hoped. Louis van Gaal came in for 7 World Cup qualifying games, and he used the same formation and really the same players for the most part in all of them, a 4-3-3 formation. So 4 defenders, 3 midfielders, and 3 forwards. However, in the Nations League games after that, he started, it seems like, experimenting a lot. So there were 4 games, and game 1 had a 3-5-2, and so did game 3. But game 2 had a 3-4-2-1, and game 4 had a 3-4-1-2. So basically, he moved from 4 defenders at the back during World Cup qualifying to 3 defenders in those 4 Nations League games, and 3 midfielders became 4 or 5 midfielders, and 3 forwards became 1 or 2 forwards. All right, and just as a note, they did fairly well in both. Well, they obviously weren't happy with their result in the Euro Cup, but now I'm talking under the new manager. That was 5 wins and 2 draws. So 4 of those wins were at home, 2 draws on the road, and 1 win. The draws were were in Norway and in Montenegro, and they finished first in the group. So presumably we're satisfied with that result, which makes one wonder why they switched it up so much for the Nations League games. However, they did quite well in the Nations League games too. They beat Belgium and Wales away, and then tied Poland at home and beat Wales away. So these new formations and a lot of new players for the Nations League seems to have been successful, which leaves one to wonder, do they go with that kind of successful, steady formula of World Cup qualifying, or do they bring in some of these new formations and new players that worked fairly well during the Nations League campaign? And they do play 2 Nations League games in September, so that will shed some light, and we will talk about that in the update. All right, let's move to the squad. So we first deal with the manager, and yeah, I've talked about those. So we'll give an overview of Frank de Boer, who's on his way out. So Frank de Boer was their manager during Euro 2022. Notes, well, I won't do the full bio on him because there's no point. I'll just say that in the Cup, they won all 3 games in the group stage. So it was wins over Ukraine, Austria, and North Macedonia. So a good start for the Netherlands. But then they very disappointingly lost to Czech Republic in the round of 16. So maybe it was kind of a mix of those results and also some dissatisfaction with him that led them to change to Louis van Gaal. I'm not sure I'm pronouncing it right. It may be more like Van Gaal. This is Louis van Gaal's 3rd stint as manager of the Netherlands team. And he was their manager in 2000 to 2002. If you recall, in 2002, they didn't make the World Cup, and he was their manager in 2012 to 2014. So that was a pretty successful result in 2014. I don't have it right in front of me here, but I believe they finished second or third in the 2014 World Cup. So that was a successful one, and now he's back since 2021, since after the last Euro Cup. In between those management stints for the Netherlands, he has been with some really big teams, starting with Ajax in the Netherlands for 6 years, from 1991 to 1997. And then a couple of stints with Barcelona. He was with Bayern Munich. And Premier League fans will know that he was one of several managers that Manchester United went through. He was there from 2014 to 16, but a whole string of managers who, on the whole, weren't very successful. He was very successful with Ajax, particularly. Okay, so Louis van Gaal leading them through the cup. So, of course, Frank de Boer is out of the picture, and Louis van Gaal we would rate as a definite. All right, moving on to goalkeepers. We're going to start actually with the retired keeper, Martin Stekelenburg. So I won't say a lot about him, but he's important to the narrative that I'm building here, because he was the starting keeper in the 2010 World Cup and the 2012 Euro Cup, and in the 2020 Euro Cup. So he was pretty old by that point. Actually, he is now 40 years old. So in the 2020 Euro Cup, I believe he was 38 years old. So pretty old even at that time. So they were probably looking towards their replacement keepers, and this is what is coming out of it. So basically we have 3 likely candidates and 3 possible candidates and 1 who seems out of the picture. So I'll start by naming them. And we have Jasper Cillessen, who is a likely candidate, Mark Flecken, who is a likely candidate, and Tim Krul, a likely candidate. And then we have 3 possible candidates, Justin Billow, and Joel Drommel, and Kel Sherpen. Okay, for those on YouTube, the if their name is in black letters, it means they've played in a tournament, and if it's gray, it means they haven't been in a tournament. Finally, we have 1 candidate who seems out of the picture, Marco Bizzo, and seems to be off the squad. Okay, so let's go back to Jasper Cillessen. He started 3 of their 13 games since the Euro Cup. He was injured for 2 and on the bench for 3. And he plays for Nijmegen in the Netherlands, usually known as NEC, actually, NEC Nijmegen. So he is 33 years old, and he has 63 caps, so a veteran with the team. And before Nijmegen, he played for Valencia in Spain and Barcelona, and was also with Ajax. But Nijmegen was actually the team he first played for, so he returned to them recently. He was the starting keeper in the 2014 World Cup. However, he wasn't selected for the Euro Cup in 2020 because he received a positive COVID test. So he was selected for the finals, but he received a positive COVID test and was replaced by Marco Bizzo below. Okay, and we should note that Netherlands missed the 2016 Euro and 2018 World Cup, so we're kind of lacking a bit of recent history with them. Anyway, Sillison extends before that, but now is in a bit of question because even though he recovered from COVID, of course, and from an injury, he still didn't make it back to the starting position. And next we have Mark Flecken. So he was not part of the picture for the 2020 Euro Cup. He's only been on the team since this year, 2022, and has 4 caps. However, he's 29 years old, so he's not a rookie. He plays for Freiburg in Germany, and then some other smaller clubs in Germany, Duisburg and Greuther Fürth. So including his first appearance, which was on the bench in October of last year, he has since started 4 of their remaining 10 games and was on the bench for 6 others. So seems to be quite firmly in the picture here. I'm just going to actually see who's been playing the most recent games there. Anyway, we'll move on with Tim Krul while I'm doing that. Okay, well, Flecken actually played 2 of the 4 UEFA Nations League games, so he's playing some of the recent games there. Okay, Tim Krul is a veteran with the team. He's been on the team since 2011 and has 15 caps. He's 34 years old, so obviously 15 caps over 11 years. He's not getting on the field that much, but we'll talk about that. He actually didn't start any of their 13 games since the Euro Cup, but he was on the bench for 9 of them, suggesting that he's still firmly entrenched as a backup keeper. He plays for Norwich in England and was with various clubs in England after moving from the Netherlands. He's always had a connection with England because he played with Newcastle's youth club. So back and forth a bit between England and Netherlands. So he was always a backup keeper in the 2012 Euro Cup and 2014 World Cup. He actually did play 1 game there. And but in the Euro 2020, he was on the roster, but on the bench for all 4 games. So, but still, quite. That's why I have him as likely. He does seem a likely backup keeper, but we'll wonder if he keeps that spot given all the other players that are coming into the picture. Okay, and that moves us on to our possible candidates. Justin Bijlow. I'm not sure I'm pronouncing that well. It's Bijlow. He had his first cap in September 2021, so he wasn't part of the team during the Euro Cup. And he started the first 6 games after the Euro Cup. And then he was out with 2 separate injuries. And the source I have say he was rested for the last 4 matches. So some of their key players, Van Dijk and Wijnaldum, have also been rested for the Nations League games. So I'm not sure what it means. And we'll talk about that a bit more when we get to Wijnaldum in particular. So definitely he seems to be in the picture. Coming in out of nowhere to start 6 of their games after the Euro Cup. He plays for Feyenoord in the Netherlands, and those 6 games are his only 6 caps. And the first being in 2021, late 2021, and he is 24 years old. So kind of new to the picture, but making a mark. Joel Drommel is our next one. He doesn't have any caps with the team, but he was on the bench for 5 of the 13 games since the Euro Cup. And he plays for PSG Eindhoven in the Netherlands, is 26 years old. And Kjell Scherpen, also no caps. He's younger, just 22 years old. And he actually plays for Brighton in England, but he's on loan to Vitesse in the Netherlands. And again, he has no caps, but he's been on the bench for the last 3 games. All right, so we have a whole bunch of players to choose from. And I'm just trying to figure out who played those last 2 Champions League games. So anyway, and I find it very difficult to kind of determine which of the players will be there, and particularly which are going to start. So actually, it was Cillessen who played the other 2 Nations League games. So hard to say. I think I have to leave it the way it is without actually choosing a starter. And the fact is, it could be among any one of those 6 goalkeepers we've talked about. And I can't pin down a starter. So I guess we'd have to say that the likely ones have the best chance of making it, but definitely there's room for some of the possible ones to move in. I wonder if Van Gaal is kind of confusing the issue by bringing in so many players. It reminds me a bit of the United States team, where they have so many players to choose from that they haven't been able to basically settle on a squad yet. Anyway, the last goalkeeper we'll talk about is Marco Bizzo. So we saw that he was brought in for the Euro Cup when Cillessen was out with COVID, and he has not played since then. So we'll leave it at that. Kind of came and went very quickly. He only has 1 cap in 2020 and is 31 years old, but seems to be out of the picture here, despite having been selected for the Euro Cup. Okay, so in review, we have a lot of confusion here. 3 likely candidates in Jasper Cillessen, Mark Flecken, and Tim Krul, and 3 possible candidates in Justin Billow, Joel Drommel, and Kjell Scherpen. And basically those players are vying to replace the retired Martin Stecklenburg. All right, let's move on to central defense. And it's a little bit the same story here, though not quite as confusing. But we'll start with central defense. We do have a category for general or versatile midfielders, but none of them are kind of coded that way. And actually, I'll tell you, the way I do the coding is I have kind of one default site that I use, one default source that I use, but then I look at other sources to see if they agree. But after a player has played a few tournaments, I can kind of make my own determination as to where they're lining up during tournaments. So I kind of factor that into the equation too. So trying to nail down their spots, but it's not always easy. In central defense, we have Stefan de Vrij, and we have Virgil van Dijk, interestingly, who has never played a tournament, although he's probably their biggest name in central defense. And then we have 3 possible candidates, 2 possible in Nathan Ake and Matthias de Ligt, and then a couple of possible candidates in, those players are likely, and possible candidates in Jurien Timber and Jordan Teze, I think is how you say his name. Teze for those on the podcast. And surprisingly, coming back after a long time, Bruno Martins Indy has emerged as a possible candidate. So we'll talk about how that came to be. All right. Well, we have Stefan de Vrij to deal with first, and he has started 8 of their 13 games since the Euro Cup, and he is 31 years old, and he's been with the Netherlands since 2012 and has 58 caps and 3 goals. He plays for Inter Milan in Italy, and was with Lazio and Feyenoord before that. So he was a starter in the 2014 World Cup. That was his first tournament, and he was named to the team of the tournament there. So did very well, and he was also a starter in the 2022. Sorry, I'll say the recent Euro Cup in 2021. And he was part of that three-man defense that we talked about as they went with a 3-4-1-2 throughout that tournament. However, not there was Virgil van Dijk. So he had been injured, kind of a long injury the previous season. So I have as a note that he ruled himself out due to injury. So I think he was kind of recovering, but perhaps decided he wasn't quite ready to take the field. So he plays for Liverpool in England, and he is 31 years old also. And he's been with Netherlands since 2015 and has 47 caps and 5 goals. So, and surprisingly, he's a well-known name, I guess, because he plays for Liverpool, but has never taken part in a tournament. Two likely candidates then are Nathan Ake and Matthias de Ligt. So we'll actually probably should start with de Ligt because he's a bit more likely. I'll move him above there. And the reason he's not definite is because he started 6 of their 13 games. Sorry, I don't think I covered that for Van Dijk. Van Dijk started 9 of their 13 games since the Euro Cup, and I mentioned he was rested for the last 3 matches. I'm not sure what rested means, but perhaps playing too many games for Liverpool decided that they would rest him instead. Anyway, Matthias de Ligt, he started 6 of their 13 games since the Euro Cup and was subbed in for 2 and on the bench for 4. And he has been with the team since 2017 and has 38 caps and 2 goals. So a regular starter there, even though he's just 23 years old. And he recently moved to Bayern Munich in Germany. He was with Juventus before that in Italy and Ajax in the Netherlands prior to that. So that's a pretty big move to Bayern Munich, although it was from a fairly big team in Juventus. However, he was part of the Euro 2022 notes, but he wasn't a starter in game 1 due to an injury, but he gained a starting position after that. However, he did receive a red card against the Czech Republic, and that's part of the reason they couldn't recover from being down there. So Matthias de Ligt, I have him as a likely candidate. Also likely is Nathan Ake. So he started just 3 of their 13 games since the Euro Cup and was subbed in for 2 others. And he has been with the team since 2017 and is 27 years old and has 27 caps and 3 goals. He's the highest scoring. No, he isn't. It seems like all of the central defenders get a couple of goals, maybe by going up for corners. Anyway, Nathan Ake plays for Manchester City in England since 2020 and was with Bournemouth in England before that and Chelsea for a long time before that, although he was loaned out to several clubs. So he was part of the Euro 2020 squad, but he was just a substitute there, subbing into games 1 and 2. All right, moving down to the possible candidates, we had Jurrien Timber. So Jurrien Timber started 3 of their 13 games since the Euro Cup and was injured for 4 and on the bench for 4. Mostly he started kind of recent games, which I'll get to in a minute. So he plays for Ajax in Netherlands since 2019, and he is just 21 years old. And his first cap was in 2021, and he now has 8 caps. So he has been getting some field time. Jurriën Timber. He was part of the Euro 2020 squad. He actually started game 1 there, but Matthias de Ligt came back to fitness and replaced him for the rest of the games. Another possible candidate is Jordan Teze. So Jordan Teze got his first cap just recently in June 2022 during the Nations League games, but he started 2 of those 4 games and subbed in for one of them and was on the bench for the other. So seems to be getting in there, but perhaps he was replacing Virgil van Dijk there. They did seem to be trying out quite a few new players during those Nations League games. So he plays for PSV Eindhoven in the Netherlands since 2018 and is just, 23 years old. So his first cap was in 2022 and he has 3 caps now. And then interestingly, Bruno Martins Indy. So he had been off the team for more than 4 years, about 4 years and 9 months or so, when he returned in June 2022 to start the last of their 3 remaining games. And he was subbed in for one other and on the bench for one other. So with the squad for those last 3 games. So I don't know what this means, whether he was just replacing someone. He was with the Netherlands before that from 2012 to 2017 and has 34 caps with the national team. And he's only 30 years old, so still kind of at the, not too old. And he plays for, I'm going to say AZ Alkmaar in the Netherlands. I know it's actually said a bit differently, and was with Stoke in England for a while before that, and with Porto in Portugal from 2014 to 17. And he was a starter in the 2014 World Cup. He started most of the games, not games 3 and 4 though. And he was off the team, as I say, in 2017, so not part of the 2020 Euro Cup squad. Actually, by that time, not even a consideration for that squad, having been off the team for 3 years. So those are the candidates for central defence. Now, they do sometimes go with a 3-man back line, and they did that in the cup. So the 3-man back line was De Vries and De Ligt, and then actually left back Daley Blind played in that central defence. For the qualifiers, it was a mix, usually Van Dijk, De Vries and De Ligt. But now, since the Nation League games, Van Dijk was rested, and it was a bit of a mess with De Vries, De Ligt, and then Ake, Timber, and even and Teze and Martin Indies, all playing some game time. So a bit confusing as to what comes out of that. We'll talk a bit more about that later. Okay, we're going to move on now to left backs. Unfortunately, it gets a little bit simpler here. So I'll start actually with Patrick Van Dijk, because he was the left back in the Euro Cup. He seems to be off the squad now, but I haven't seen any kind of official thing that he's retired from the national team. He's still playing for at the club level with Galatasaray in Turkey, but he hasn't appeared since the 2021 Euro Cup, even though he was the starter in that cup. So he was with the Netherlands since 2013, and had 19 caps in that time. So actually wasn't kind of a regular in that position. In fact, he wasn't selected for the 2014 World Cup, and they had no tournaments since then until the Euro 2020. So that's his only tournament. He is off the team, though, it seems, and replacing him in the left-back position is Daley Blind, who we have as a definite candidate. I'm sorry, I should have gone through the names at the beginning to introduce them. So definite candidate Daley Blind, and likely candidate Tyrell Malacia. And Owen Windal, a injury doubt, but we would have had him as possible, but unlikely. All right, so going back to Daley Blind, he started 10 of their 13 games since the Euro Cup, and he was suspended for one and on the bench for two others. And he's been with the Netherlands since 2013 and has 92 caps and 2 goals. He's now 32 years old. So he is back with Ajax in the Netherlands. He did a stint at Manchester United from 2014 to 18, so under manager Louis van Gaal there. And he had been with Ajax in the Netherlands for a long time, 6 years prior to that Man United stint. He was a starter in the 2014 World Cup, all 7 games there. Yeah, I have confirmation that they finished 3rd in that cup. I get confused between 2010 and 2014. And he was also a starter in the Euro Cup, starting all 4 games. As I said, he's sometimes moved back into central defense, so the left central defender when they have 3 central defenders. And that was the case in the Euro Cup in 2021. And as I said, Van Aanholt played as the left winger or the left, the left midfielder. Okay. Next we have Tyrell Malacia. Again, not sure if I'm pronouncing that right, but he got his first appearance on the bench in September 2021, so shortly after the Euro Cup. In fact, directly after the Euro Cup. He started 4 of their remaining 13 games, was subbed in and on the bench for all others. So he is actually registered with Manchester United in England since recently, and he was with Feyenoord in the Netherlands before that. He doesn't have any tournaments under his belt, so we have him as a likely candidate, definitely the backup there, if not starting some games. Okay, possible but unlikely is Owen Windal. So he didn't start any of their games after the Euro Cup and was injured for 5 of them, including the last 4. But he did make it to the bench. Oh, he's only played 1 game. However, he's worth mention because he was selected for the Euro 2020 squad, where he was a substitute, so subbed into games 1 and 2 there. He plays for Ajax, but that's a recent move from AZ Alkmaar in the Netherlands. So he's been with the team since 2020 and has 11 caps. So he kind of was in the picture recently, but perhaps that injury has caused him to drift out of the picture, or the advent of Tyrell Malacia, who seems to have taken over his role there. So we're going to put Daley Blind as the starter there, and we will have Tyrell Malacia as likely to make the squad, but less likely to be a starter. All right, well, moving on to right backs. We have Denzel Dumfries, who made a good impression in the Euro Cup there, as a definite candidate. And we have Hans Hateboer as a possible candidate. And we have Joel Veltman as seemingly off the squad. And oh, I should have dealt with him as the last name there. And we have two candidates as possible but unlikely, Jeremy Frimpong and Devin Wrench. So let's go back to the top and talk about Denzel Dumfries. Well, in the 3-4-1-2 formation of the Euro Cup, they didn't have a right back or a left back. So basically, those players would move up the field and become one of the four midfielders, one of the wide midfielders. And that's exactly what he did, Dumfries, in the Cup. And since the Cup, no, I'll just finish. So he started all four games in the Euro Cup and was quite good. He scored 2 of their 8 goals, including a late winning goal on a fantastic header over Ukraine there. So, yeah, kind of emerged as a player there. And since then, he has started 11 of their 13 games. So a definite starter. It seems like... I don't know if it was that move that got him a move to Inter Milan in Italy, sorry, that good performance in the Cup. But nevertheless, he is with Inter Milan in Italy since 2021, and he moved from PSV Eindhoven there, having kind of moved up through the Netherlands teams there. All right, so Denzel Dumfries, a definite candidate. Hans Hateboer is a possible candidate. He started 2 of their games since the Euro Cup and was on the bench for 4 others. And that was after being injured for the first 7 matches. So who knows if he would have been there during those injuries, but he seems a fairly strong candidate as the backup now. He's actually been with the team since 2018 and has 13 caps and is 28 years old. And he plays for Atalanta in Italy for a long time, since 2017, after joining them from Groningen in the Netherlands. However, he was not selected for the Euro 2020 squad. He was selected for the preliminary squad, but he didn't make the final cut there. However, he does seem to have been playing more in recent times. So I'd almost say he's a likely candidate because they don't have another right back. However, it is possible that someone will move from another position to be the backup in that position. Or one of these players could be called up. So Jeremy Frimpong hasn't earned a cap for the national team, but I included him because he has been with Bayer Leverkusen, a big team, fairly big team in Germany since 2021, and he was with Celtic in Scotland before that, and he was with the Manchester City Youth Club in England. So I thought he was a bit of a name to keep an eye on there. He's just he's 22 years old right now. However, at that age, he should be making an appearance on the national team if he's going to be selected for the World Cup. Devin Wrench is also possible but unlikely, and he earned his first cap in September 2021 after the Euro Cup, and he didn't start any games, but he was subbed in for 1 and on the bench for 2. But he wasn't available for some of the games because he was with the under-21 team. So he is 19 years old and plays for Ajax in the Netherlands since 2020. Sometimes for their youth team, Young Ajax, but he seems to be making some appearances for the senior team there. So both of those names, maybe names for the future. Maybe this cup will come too soon for them. And one other player to mention is Joel Veltman. So he's actually making an impression with Brighton in England in the Premier League right now, because Brighton's doing quite well. He's been with Brighton since 2020, and he moved from Ajax in the Netherlands, where he was from 2012 to 2020. and he was with the team from 2013 to the Euro Cup, and he's 31 years old. So he was selected for the World Cup 2014, but he was just a substitute there. And he was also selected for Euro 2020, where he was a substitute, also appearing only briefly in game one. So it'll be interesting to see whether his good work at Brighton recently makes him a candidate again. But as I've said, he hasn't played any games since the 2020, or he hasn't even been on the bench. Hasn't been called up, is what I'm trying to say, since the 2020 Euro Cup in 2021. All right, so going back to the top, we'd have to say Dumfries is a definite candidate, and I'm not quite ready to say that Hateboer is going to be called up to the Cup. We have him as just a possible candidate. Okay. We also have a category for general or versatile midfielders as we move on to the midfield, but we don't have any players coded that way. So we move on to defensive midfielders, where we have two players. Teun Koopmeiners we have as a likely candidate. Teun Koopmeiners. That's a new name for me, honestly. And Jordi Schutten as a possible candidate. These are defensive midfielders. So Teun Koopmeiners started 4 of their 13 games since the Euro Cup and was subbed in for 4 others and on the bench for 5 others. So at least on the bench for all 13 games, though a starter in only 4. So he's been with the team actually since 2020 and has 9 caps and 1 goal, and is quite young at 24 years old. He plays for Atalanta in Italy and was in the Netherlands before that. And he was selected for the Euro 2020 Cup, but he didn't see any field time in that game. So just on the bench, and sometimes not even on the bench. So he was a bit of a surprise selection for that tournament, but he seems to have made inroads since. The problem is they don't seem to use a formation that specifically uses a defensive midfielder. So when he's on the field, it's generally as a central midfielder. All right, the possible candidate is Jordi Schutten. So he got his first cap in June 2022, so during those Nations League games, and he started just one of those games, but was on the bench for 2 others. So he's 25 years old and is with Bologna in Italy. So perhaps we'll make the squad there. But I'm not even, okay, I think we can put Koopmeiners down as likely to make the Cup, but we can't put him down as a definite starter. So I'll consider him kind of a substitute. All right. Moving on to central midfield, we have a few candidates here, but the steadiest player is Frankie de Jong. So Frankie de Jong we have as a definite. And then we have Jorginho Wijnaldum, who was the captain. Now Virgil van Dijk is the captain. We have him as a likely candidate. And we have Martin de Roon as a possible candidate. And we have Ryan Gravenberg as a possible candidate, but an injury concern. And finally, we have Donny van de Beek, who seems to be off the squad. So we'll talk a little bit about these players. Just as a kind of a preview, in the Cup, it was a fairly steady midfield in that 3-4-1-2 formation, and in the middle, it was usually or perhaps always, it was de Jong and de Roon with Gravenberch stepping in for one start. And throughout qualification, in that 4-3-3 formation, it was De Jong in that central midfield role. However, it's been a bit confused since then, especially in the 3-5-2 formation, where there are basically three central defenders. So I'll deal with that at the player level as we go through. So as we saw, Frankie de Jong is usually a steady presence there. He did miss one game, so he started 12 of the 13 games since the Euro Cup and actually was subbed in for the other. So he has been with the Netherlands since 2018 and has 44 caps and 1 goal and is 25 years old. And Frankie de Jong plays for Barcelona in Spain since 2019 after he moved there from Ajax in the Netherlands. And he was a starter in the 2020 Euro Cup as we noted. So that is Frankie de Jong, a definite candidate there. Now, Jorginho Wijnaldum is a bit of an interesting case here. So he was actually a central attacking midfielder. We have him as a central midfielder, but he played an attacking role in the cup, and he had scored, and he must have been in the qualifying games in leading up to the cup because he scored 8 of their 24 goals in qualifying. And I'm just trying to see if he scored any in the cup. Yes, he scored 3 of their 8 goals in the cup. So really was more on the attacking side there. But he's listed as a central midfielder. And in World Cup qualification, he seems to have moved back to a right midfielder role in World Cup qualification. Now, for Nations League, he was either not selected or actually, as I said, my source said he was rested. Hang on, I'm not sure he was actually rested. I'll check on that one. Okay, but anyway, he started 6 of the. He only scored 2 of their 33 goals in qualifying for this cup. He started 6 of their 13 games since the Euro Cup and was subbed in for 1 other. So that's why I have him just as a likely candidate, likely based more on his reputation. But yes, I made a mistake. He wasn't rested like Van Dijk and one other, the goalkeeper there. He just simply wasn't on the squad for any of the last 4 Nations League games. So I'm not sure where that leaves him. I did get one suggestion that he was injured, so that might be the case. But I haven't confirmed that. Oh, I have. He has a fractured tibia, so actually will be out. So I'm going to move him to injured there because they say they expect him back in January 2023. So I'm just finding this news out right now here, but that's an important thing to learn because I was wondering where he was. It was unusual that they would just leave him off the squad. So we'd have to put him as a player who's not going to make it to the squad. He plays for Paris Saint-Germain in France and has 86 caps and 26 goals. The 32-year-old does, and was captain of the squad in the 2020 Euro Cup where he started all 4 games. So a big loss to them there, and that kind of explains too why there has been some shifting around on the team. All right, well, we move on to Martin de Roon. And Martin de Roon hasn't started any games since the Euro Cup, but he was subbed in for 2 and on the bench for 5. However, he wasn't selected for any of the Nations League games, those 4 most recent games. So Martin de Roon has been with Netherlands since 2016 and has 28 caps and is 31 years old. And he plays for Atalanta in Italy since 2017. Actually, since 2015, because he left Atalanta, joined Middlesbrough in England for a year or two, and then went back to Atalanta. And he was a starter in the 2020 Euro Cup. So yeah, he kind of seems to be making his way off the squad now, despite being a starter in the Euro Cup. The next possible candidate, but also under threat of injury, is Ryan Gravenberg. So Ryan Gravenberg has been I'll give his recent participation. He actually didn't start any of their games since the 2021 Euro Cup, but he was subbed in for 3 and on the bench for 4. However, he was injured for the last 4 games and with the under-23 team for a couple of others. So I don't know what the injury is. So I'll have to maybe try to look for that while we're talking here. Actually, he's not listed as injured anymore, so he may just be with the under-23 team. It's hard to say. Actually, really hard to say whether he's part of the squad or not. So he's been with Netherlands since 2021, but he has 10 caps and one goal, and is 20 years old. The interesting thing about him is he recently made a move to Bayern Munich in Germany, moving there from Ajax, where he played for 4 years. So yeah, I do see he has an ankle injury, but I don't have any kind of information on a return date for him. Okay, so he was part of the 2020 Euro squad there, and he was subbed in for 1 game, so on the bench. And really the most interesting thing about him is whether that move to Bayern Munich, maybe he's phoning me up to tell me about this, but honestly, I can't take his call right now. Okay, so Ryan Gravenberch, a possible candidate, and then seemingly off the squad is Donny van der Beek. So he had scored, he had last appeared for the national team before the Euro Cup, so on the bench in June 2021. And that's a bit of a surprise because he made a move from Ajax to Manchester United in England. That was after Louis van Gaal's time there, and there was a lot of excitement about his coming. And up until 2021, he had 19 caps and 3 goals, and is just 25 years old. However, he doesn't seem to have gotten much field time at Manchester United, so I wonder if that has kind of cost him his place on the Netherlands team. As far as the Euro Cup goes, he was very active in the lead up to the Cup, playing 14 of 21 games there. But he got injured a few days before the opening game, and they didn't even actually replace him with another player. And he actually, so injured for the Euro Cup and has made no appearance since then. However, I do think, if he makes kind of an impression on Man United over the next few weeks, could find his way back into the national team setup. All right, so that brings us to the end of central midfielders. So we have Frankie de Jong as a definite candidate, and we only have just possible candidates there, although they will need someone to replace the injured Jorginho Wijnaldum. So it could be Martin de Roon or Ryan Gravenberch, or possibly Donny van der Beek if he kind of comes back into some form. But right now, I can't say that any of them I would predict as a likely candidate for making the squad. All right, let's move on to left midfield. And actually, they don't have any players designated as a right midfielder or as a left midfielder. They do have right wingers and left wingers. Excuse me, I'm going to take a little drink here. Okay, sorry about that. So they did have they did have a 4-3-3 formation in the World Cup qualifiers, but they actually brought players in from other positions to play as right midfielder and left midfielder there. We saw Jorginho Wijnaldum actually move back into a more defensive role. So anyway, we'll deal with those as we go through the players. So no right midfielders. And no left midfielders either. However, I am going to deal with Steven Berghuis under a right midfielder role here, and as a definite candidate, not necessarily as a right midfielder. He's listed as a right winger, but he played as a right central midfielder. In 2 games of the the Nations League there, and and played as a right forward. I'm trying to figure out why I'm dealing with him as a right midfielder. It must be just those 2 games. But he does play in a more attacking role sometimes. Anyway, on with the show. Steven Berghuis. So he started 9 of their 13 games since the Euro Cup and was injured for 2 of them and on the bench for 2 others. So a definite candidate, at least to be on the bench and likely as a starter. So Steven Berghuis has been with the national team since 2016 and has 37 caps and 2 goals and is 31 years old. So he plays with Ajax in the Netherlands and was with Feyenoord in the Netherlands before that. And most of his career has been in the Netherlands, though with various teams. He did do a short stint with Watford in England. His first tournament was the 2020 Euro Cup, but he was a sub. He was a sub and used just in games 3 and 4 there. He did make a goal-saving header off the line against North Macedonia, which was good, but it didn't earn him a starting position for game 4. However, he has been starting regularly after the Cup, so we have him as a definite candidate there. But really, we should have maybe left him as a right winger there. Maybe I'll move him a bit later. Okay, let's move on because we do have some left wingers here. So the first, I'll go through the names. Steven Bergwijn, we have as a likely candidate. Noah Lang as a likely candidate, and Cody Gakpo as a likely candidate, and Ryan Babel also coded as a left winger, but seems to be off the squad. So let's take a look at Steven Bergwijn. He has started 5 of their 13 games since the Euro Cup and was subbed in for 5 of those, but injured for 2 also. So a regular player, at least on the bench. And he has been with the team since 2018 and has 22 caps and 6 goals and is 25 years old. However, he wasn't selected for the Euro Cup. He was selected for the preliminary squad, but didn't make the final squad. So again, another player who's been starting a bit more since then, but not starting enough that I would put him as a definite candidate. Pretty much definite to reach the cup, but not a definite starter. Moving on, we have a couple of young candidates in Noah Lang and Cody Gakpo. So Noah Lang started, he got his first cap after the Euro Cup in October 2021, and he started 3 of their remaining 10 games. And he subbed in for 2 and was on the bench for 2. So that gives him 5 caps since his first one in 2021, and he has 1 goal, 23 years old he is. He plays for Club Bruges in Belgium, and he was with Ajax before that from 2019 to 21. Kind of came up through the Ajax youth system. Was with his first youth club at 4 years of age, interestingly, which is not as rare as many might think. Okay, so we have him as a likely candidate because he has been pretty much on the squad since the beginning, since his first appearance. Cody Gakpo started 5 of their 13 games since the Euro Cup, subbed in for 1 and on the bench for 1, and was injured for 4. So another player who has been a fairly regular player in recent times. His first cap was in 2021, and he has 7 caps and 2 goals. And like Noah Lang is 23 years old, and he plays for PSV Eindhoven in the Netherlands. But even though his first cap was 2021, he was on the squad for the Euro 2020 tournament. So he appeared only in game 3 there. So that's, okay, that was in 2021. That's why I'm getting confused. So that was probably his first cap in the Euro Cup, but on the bench there. So again, left wingers here in the 4-3-3. These players will generally be the left forward. But Gakpo I have seen as kind of a central attacking midfielder once, and Noah Lang was a right forward once. So they tend to shift around a bit, and we saw that Steven Berghuis also plays as a forward, outside forward sometimes. Okay, well, maybe I should move Steven Berghuis down to a right winger because he's the only right winger candidate that they have. And keep in mind he does actually move back into central midfielders, whereas the left wingers we've talked about tend to be on the attacking side. And we have one more left winger to talk about, Ryan Babel. So Ryan Babel was off the team for a while, actually, and then kind of made a comeback appearance for a little while. I'm just going to check into that here because I didn't make a note of when he actually did come back. I think I'll just skip it and leave it at that because he seems well and truly off the squad, having last appeared for the national team in March 2021. So his return, I do have notes in the soccer file here, actually played 15 of their 21 games in the lead up to the Euro Cup, so was quite entrenched on the squad, but wasn't selected for the Euro Cup. Which ended up being a bit of a surprise since he had played so many lead-up games. But we won't go into more detail on him. Perhaps we'll cover him if he makes it back to the squad. We'll cover him in the update squad. Okay, so going back over the left wingers, we have Steven Bergwijn, Noah Lang, and Cody Gakpo. And I'm almost sure 1 or 2 of them will be starters in the Cup. But the problem is we don't know who. So he's one of the issues on the squad is whether they're going to be using these new players that they're trying out during these Nations League games. However, I do have all three of them as likely to be on the squad for the Cup. Okay, right wingers. Well, we talked about Steven Berghuis, and we have him as a definite candidate as a right winger, but sometimes plays as a central midfielder. Okay, moving on to talk about the attacking force. We start with attacking midfielders, and we begin with Davy Klaassen, who we consider a likely candidate. And we have Guus Til as a possible candidate, and Mohamed Ihatharan as a player who seems to be off the squad. So Davy Klaassen was actually a kind of more central midfielder, a left central midfielder in most of the World Cup qualifying games, and also a central midfielder in the Nations League games. So we have him as attacking midfielder, but recently, at least, you can think of him more as a central midfielder. He has started 9 of their 13 games since the Euro Cup, so and subbed in for 1 and on the bench for the 3 others. So it seems like a definite candidate for being on the squad, but probably in a central midfield role there. I wonder if I should move him up to definite, because he also scored 4 goals in qualifying and was their second top scorer. So I think I'll move him up to definite, but a little less likely as a starter than as a candidate to meet to reach the Cup. Anyway, he is 29 years old and has been with the Netherlands since 2014, and he has 34 caps and 9 goals, and is with Ajax in Netherlands. Actually, this is his second stint with Ajax. He was with them from 2011 to 17, but then was with Everton and then Werder Bremen in Germany for a while. So now has made his way back to Ajax. So as we said, he's regularly starting games. He wasn't selected for the 2014 World Cup. I don't know if his first cap came before or after that, but wasn't selected even for the preliminary squad there. And he was selected for the Euro 2020 squad, but he was on the roster but saw no actions. He sat on the bench all game, and actually he had returned from a 3-year absence there in the lead up to that cup, so it's kind of making his way made his way back onto the team, but seems firmly entrenched now. The next one is Guus Til. Guus Til started 1 of their 13 games. He actually earned a single cap in March of 2018, and then was off the squad until September 21, so after the Euro Cup. And he started just 1 of their games, but he has subbed in for 3 and been on the bench for 7. So, again, kind of a likely to make the Cup, but not likely to be a starter. So just quickly, he has 5 caps and 1 goal, and is 25 years old and plays for PSV Eindhoven in the Netherlands. That was a recent move. So actually, in his only start, I guess, in one of the recent games, he has played as a central midfielder, a left midfielder. I think that was during World Cup qualification, but I'm not sure. Anyway, I've seen him as a left midfielder. Okay, finally, we'll move on to Mohamed Ihatharan. So he last appeared for the team shortly after the Euro Cup in September 2021. And he was a consideration for the World Cup, but actually didn't get chosen even for the preliminary squad. But he was on the bench for some of the games in the lead up to the squad. And one of the reasons I have him here is that he's with Juventus in Italy since 2021, although he has been loaned to Ajax just recently. So I was thinking he must have been with Ajax before that, but he wasn't. He was with PSV Eindhoven. Anyway, he's just 20 years old, so maybe a candidate for the future there. But after a brief appearance on the bench before the Euro Cup, and after, he doesn't seem to be part of the squad right now. Okay, so we have as a definite candidate Davy Klaassen, but probably in a central midfield rather than an attacking midfield role. And maybe true too of Goose Till, as they tend to use wingers or forwards for the front line. So the attacking midfielders are kind of pushed back. And Mohamed Ihataren maybe an up-and-comer for the team. All right. Well, we don't have any secondary strikers. Well, we do have players playing in that role, but we don't have any listed as secondary strikers. So we'll move on to forwards. So we have a definite candidate in Memphis Depay and two likely candidates in Donyell Malen and Wout Weghorst. And two possible candidates in Arnaud Danjuma and Vincent Janssen making a return there. And then a possible but unlikely candidate in Luc de Jong, who I believe is injured. I'll try to check that while I'm talking here. And then Quincy Promes seems to be off the squad. All right, I'm just going to take a sip of water here. I'm back, sorry. Okay, so let's go back to the beginning and talk about Memphis Depay. And in the cup, it was kind of Memphis Depay together with either Weghorst or Malen. Just looking at the formation, yeah, it was two forwards up top. So Weghorst played two and Malen played two. When they went to the 4-3-3, Depay became the kind of the center forward of that three-man lineup. And Weghorst and Malen didn't start any of them. But wingers Berghuis and Bergwijn and Gapco, Lang and Danjuma kind of supported him on the flanks during the World Cup qualification games. And then Weghorst came back into the picture for the Nations League games. But Malen, who I believe is injured or was injured, is not. And then Vincent Janssen made an unexpected return in the last game. So let's take a look at Memphis Depay as a definite candidate. So he started 11 of their 13 games since the Euro Cup and was subbed in for one and on the bench for one, so always there. He has been with Netherlands since 2013 and has 80 caps and 42 goals, an amazing percentage, which we'll look at soon, and is 28 years old. So he's currently with Barcelona in Spain, and he was with Lyon in France and with Manchester United in England. I'm pretty sure that's during the Louis van Gaal period too. And he was with PSV Eindhoven in the Netherlands from 2011 to 15. So he was a substitute in the 2014 World Cup, and he was nominated for the Best Young Player of the Tournament award there. And in the 2020 Euro Cup, he started all 4 games and scored 2 of their 8 goals there. So he also did very well in qualifying, scoring 6 of their 14 goals for Euro 2020 qualifying. So, and he scored 12 of their 33 goals in qualifying for this cup. including a hat-trick when they played Turkey at home. So he was obviously their top scorer there, and actually the co-top scorer in European qualifying for this World Cup. So a big name there in Memphis Depay, and they hope that he will bring that form to the Cup. A likely candidate is Donyell Malen. Now I'm not sure because we'll see. He scored 3 of their goals in qualifying, 3 of their 33 goals, and he started 2 of their games since the 2021 Euro Cup, but was subbed in for 4 and on the bench for 3. However, he's been injured for the last 4 matches, but it's only with a strain, so he will be likely to be fit again. But now, having read this out, I'm wondering if I should put him as a possible candidate there. Anyway, he's been with the team since 2019 and has 19 caps and 4 goals, and he's 23 years old. So he plays for Borussia Dortmund in Germany and was with PSV Eindhoven before that. So his first tournament was the 2020 Euro Cup, where he was subbed into games 1 and 2 and then gained a starting position, as we said, playing 2 games. So he was notably good in that cup. So I'm a bit surprised he hasn't really been fully established on the squad since then. I nevertheless have him as a likely candidate, but not a likely starter. Okay, Wout Weghorst started just 1 of their 13 games since the last Euro Cup and was subbed in for 3, but was on the bench for 9 others. So definitely, a strong candidate to make the squad, but almost certainly a bench player there. He's been with Netherlands since 2018 and has 14 caps and 3 goals, and is 30 years old. And he was a starter in the Euro 2020 Cup, started games 1 and 2, but then lost his starting position to Malen, and has not been a starter since. Sorry, I'm having a drink of water. Okay, next candidate is Arnaud Danjuma. So he has started 2 of their 13 games since the Euro Cup, subbed in for 2 and on the bench for 1. However, he's been injured for the last 4. Injured for the last 4 matches, and I'll see if I can find out what the status is on his injury. Muscular problem. So it looks like he could be fit for the Cup. He has been with the team since 2018, but only has 6 caps and 2 goals, and is 25 years old. He plays for Villarreal in Spain. He moved there in 2021 from Bournemouth in England, where he was for 2 years, and he was in Belgium before that. Arnaud Danjuma, so we have him as a possible candidate. And coming back into the picture is Vincent Janssen. So he actually returned after a 6.5-year absence, 6.5-year absence, to play their last Nations League game in June 2022. So just popping his head up there, we'll really have to keep an eye on whether he plays any of the games in September. He was with the team since 2016, but just has 17 caps, although he's done well in those caps, scoring 7 goals, and he's currently 29 years old. So a lot of Premier League, English Premier League fans will remember he was with Tottenham in England from 2016 to 19, but didn't really live up to the hopes, the high hopes he came in with, and he was loaned to Fenerbahce, and then went off to play for Monterrey in Mexico. But recently he returned to Europe and is now with Royal Antwerp in Belgium, which is a fairly small team. However, he has popped his head up for the national team and remains a possible candidate. When someone comes in at the end like that, it's a bit hard to judge, but you have to go with at least a possible candidate if the manager is bringing them in, shortly before the cup. Of course, we have a little while to observe whether he's going to continue being used. As a possible but unlikely candidate, we have Luc de Jong. So Luc de Jong has not played any of their games since the 2020 Euro Cup, but he was on the bench for two of them. And I see that he is injured, so I'm going to look into that while I'm talking here. And he has been with the team since 2011 and has 38 caps and 8 goals. He's 32 years old now, and he's with PSV Eindhoven for the second time. He moved back recently, and he was with Sevilla in Spain, who had loaned him to Barcelona in Spain. So he spent 3 years in Spain. And before that was with PSV Eindhoven, and after that too. So Luc de Jong was chosen actually for the 2012 Euro Cup, where he was on the bench but saw no action. Also chosen for the 2020 Euro Cup last year, and he had just subbed in for a couple of games there, but he was actually injured for game 4. Okay, now I'm going to try to find out what his injury is. It's just a calf injury, so I don't think it accounts for all the games he's been missing. So basically, he never really made it as a starter on the squad, at least as far as tournaments go. And it also looks like he's going to struggle to make this tournament. We have him as a possible but unlikely. Finally, we'll take a quick look at Quincy Promes. So he last appeared in the Euro Cup, where he was a substitute. So I have him as seemingly off the squad. He plays for Spartak Moscow in Russia, one of the players who remained in Russia even after the recent problems there. And he was on the squad since 2014 and has 50 caps and 7 goals. So didn't really make a name in a tournament, but played a lot of games for them. However, he now seems to be off the squad. So in review of the forwards, we have Memphis Depay as a definite candidate. And all the others, I wouldn't be bold enough to say that they will even make it to the cup. I'm actually thinking of moving Malen and Weghorst are kind of almost at the possible level here. So I'm not convinced that they're going to make the cut, but I do have them as likely. All right, well, that brings us to the end of the player-by-player review, and then we'll just have a bit of discussion about the squad here, kind of going back to the notes at the top. So once again, Frank de Jong managed them during the cup, and then Louis van Gaal took over after the cup. So they got rid of de Jong and replaced him with Louis van Gaal in his third stint as Netherlands manager. So we did talk about a bit of disunity on the squad. And soon we're going to talk about the club affiliations of Netherlands. The question, though, is whether Van Gaal is the man who's going to bring all that talent together to be one of the strong teams in the cup. So Netherlands do have a lot of talent, but aren't always unified in the dressing room or on the field. The question then is Van Gaal going to be the solution for that? The other question, which is related to Van Gaal, is they had a very steady formation and were using the same players through their 7 games after the Euro Cup of World Cup qualifying. And they did well with that in a 4-3-3 formation. But now, in the last Nations League games, they used 3 different formations over those 4 games and a whole lot of new players. So bringing players in, maybe to check them out, to see, usually that's done during friendlies, I must say, but to kind of see what talent they have and maybe look into new talent. But it's getting a bit close to the World Cup to kind of start that process. So my question is whether they're creating a problem for themselves, bringing in new players that they then have to consider. What do you do with the old players who were in that position and stuff like that? Those are my concerns for Netherlands. All right, let's move on. Club affiliations. Well, I've talked about them as we went through the players one by one, but in summary, they just have players playing for some of the top clubs in the Netherlands. So that's 5 players with Ajax and 3 players with PSV Eindhoven. They have 2 players in Spain with Barcelona and 1 with Villarreal. They have 2 players in Italy. In Italy, they have 2 players for Inter Milan, 2 with Atalanta, 1 with Roma. England, 3 of the top teams, Liverpool, Manchester City, and Man United. They have 1 player at each of those teams. 2 with Bayern Munich in Germany and 1 at Dortmund, and Besiktas in Turkey. So just top clubs all around there. Some of them do play for kind of secondary clubs like Vitesse in Netherlands, Bologna in Italy, Norwich in England, Freiburg, and stuff like that. But we would have to say their club affiliation, their pedigree is very strong, and sometimes too much is made of that. But definitely going into the cup, that's why I say, can Van Gaal bring the talent together? Because obviously they have to be talented to reach those teams. But the question is whether they show it as a team, as a national team, because sometimes Netherlands doesn't. Okay, well, I put together a little chart of the players that we had as definite, likely, or possible, and I'm kind of comparing them with other teams as I go through this podcast. So it's just a kind of a fun little experiment that I do, and we take a look at 4 things. So one is the total number of players under consideration. So that gives an idea as to which squads are very steady and which clubs are trying out a lot of new players as they come into the cup. So the average there is currently around 30 candidates. Netherlands has 33, so they seem to be trying out a lot of new candidates. By comparison, we have Ghana, who are trying out a lot of new candidates, kind of worryingly so. But then we have Senegal with 24 and Qatar with 26. Both steady teams playing the game, same players playing their games time after time, working together and working out the teamwork and the communication on the field. As far as Netherlands goes, they seem to have that as in their World Cup qualification, and now have gone through a lot of experimentation in the 4 recent Nations League games. The next stat is the average age of the team. So in general, 25 to 27 seems to be the average. And Netherlands is 26.6 among the players on my chart there. So that's pretty average. And they have actually, a lot of the veterans are in their 30s. They have quite a few players in their 30s. But they do have quite a few younger players too. So it kind of balances out in the middle. But I would say actually a good balance of veterans and new players coming in. Average number of caps is 26.5. And let me see how that compares with other teams. That is about average. Qatar was shockingly more than everyone else because they've been playing so many games together as a unit over the last 3 years. And the last one is the total goals among the players we've selected. And Netherlands is high at 130, well above the average of 86. That averages out to 3.9 goals per player. So because we're talking about a larger number of players, 33 players, that partly accounts for the number of goals. But I think in general, the stats shows them to be an attacking team. They can definitely score a lot of goals. Okay, we'll go through the players to watch or the issues to watch. And in defense, well, we have 6 candidates for goalkeeper. We're going to go through the candidates at the end here. But the big question is who is going to replace Stekelenburg as the starting goalkeeper, because they've been mixing and matching quite a bit. The other question is, will they go with the World Cup qualifying back line, or will they start using some of the newcomers that they've really introduced in the last 4 Nations League games? I gotta say, the Nations League games went well. They won 3 and tied 1, so not a problem. But they may be creating a selection problem for themselves by having, a reliable background and a whole bunch of new players who want to get onto the field. And then who do you choose? During the podcast, I compared that to the USA's team, who seemed to have a similar problem. I did have a note about Wijnaldum, and is he there or is he not? And the answer is he is not, because during the podcast we saw that he's injured and not expected back until after the World Cup. He played an important role in the attacking end at first, so they've replaced that attacking side of Wijnaldum with a whole bunch of new players, and on the central midfielder role, which he played during the World Cup qualification games, he moved back into the central midfielder. They seem to be a bit lacking there, and so they sometimes move attacking midfielders back to play in the central midfield. So again, more of an attacking team. As far as the attack goes, I usually give the percentages of some of the top attackers. So who can we expect to get the goals from? Well, Netherlands has 1 player above 50% and 3 players above 30%. So that is very high in terms of goals per cap ratio. I'm giving listeners a little bit of time to think who I'm going to say. And probably not a surprise that Memphis Depay is the one above 50%. He has 42 goals in 80 games. Really a very high ratio there. So we can expect to see him scoring goals. Amazingly, the second highest is Vincent Janssen. Vincent Janssen, who only appeared in the very last game of recent games. He is 38.9%, 7 goals in 18 games. And then Danjuma and Jorginho Wijnaldum, both above 30%. Danjuma, though, it's only 2 goals in 6 games, so not really a fair way to judge there. But Wijnaldum, 26 goals in 86 games, so they'll miss him possibly at both ends of the field. But other players who are not guaranteed starters, but who you may see scoring goals during the Cup, are Malen and Weghorst. They're both above 20%. Even Davy Klaassen. And then Steven Bergwijn and Cody Gakpo are both above 25%. Along with Klaassen. And then Noah Lang 1 goal in 5 games, a new name. We'll go through new names. But they have a lot of players who can score, although a lot of them will be substitutes rather than starters. So the only kind of starter star is Memphis Depay as a scorer. So look for that. Okay, we'll go through just by name some of the new people on the squad. So we have Louis van Gaal. Louis van Gaal is their new manager since after the Euro Cup. We have a whole whack of new goalies who have all been kind of involved in some way or another. So again, we talked about them in the long version of the podcast or of the mediacast here. So we'll just mention them by name in this review. Mark Flecken, Justin Billow, Joel Drommel, and Kjell Scherpen. So definitely among goalkeepers, they have a bit of a selection problem because in addition to that, they have 2 likely candidates on the table too. In central defence, we have Jurriën Timber making his way into the squad, and to a lesser degree, Jordan Teze, and even Bruno Martins Indy coming back from a long winter off the team, recently coming into the squad. So he's a veteran, but I put him as new because he's newly back. In the defensive midfield, Jordi Schouten, and left wingers, a couple of them in Noah Lang and Cody Gakpo. Some of these won't make the team, but quite a few of them will. And Goose Till is an attacking midfielder, but generally playing as a defensive, as a central midfielder. And then injuries. Well, first and foremost, Jorginho Wijnaldum is not expected to be in the Cup. He's expected to recover sometime after the Cup. We also have Bayern Munich player Ryan Gravenberg with, I believe it was an ankle injury there. Left defender who is a doubtful candidate anyway, Owen Windahl. And forward Arnaud Danjuma, although I think we said that he should be fit by the time the Cup comes around. Okay, finally, notable absences, and again, we talked about them in the long version of the podcast, but Martin Stecklenburg, his absence kind of creates a void to fill as starting goalkeeper. In left defence, Patrick van Arnholt, who seems to now be replaced by Daley Blind. We have a player who's doing well in England, but is off the squad, the national squad, Joel Veltman. And similarly, Donny van de Beek with Man United in England, which was a big move for him, but he hasn't been seeing game time, which seems to cost him his position on the national squad. And Ryan Babel, who kind of made a comeback prior to the Euro Cup, but didn't make the Euro Cup squad. And finally, Luc de Jong, who did have an injury, but that doesn't seem to be the reason that he's not with the national squad. He just seems to not be being selected. So if we learn anything more about these players, we can do that during the update podcast. But in closing here, I'm just going to go through the players we've selected as starters for the squad. And again, it's hard to tell. They had a very steady squad for the World Cup 2021 qualifying games, or the qualifying games for this cup. But then they kind of put it in the blender for the Nations League games. And now I don't know what to expect. Anyway, it will be Louis van Gaal managing it, unless they get rid of him at this late point. For goalkeeper, we have 3 likely candidates, Jasper Cillessen, Mark Flecken, and Tim Krul, but we also have 3 possible candidates we introduced in the new section, and who knows which of them is going to be the starter. I would kind of edge towards Jasper Cillessen there, but you know, in terms of recent participation, which we discussed in the long version, it's still hard to know. Central defenders. Oh, it looks like we didn't do starters when we went through that. But we have Stefan de Vrij and Virgil van Dijk. I think they will be the starters. Matthias de Ligt is a candidate, and if they go with a three-man defense, a stronger candidate yet. But I just have him as likely to make the squad here. So yeah, the definite, likely, possible, all of that is their likelihood of making the final squad. And then the green highlights for those on YouTube, the ones I'm going through now, are starters, the players we think are starters. So left back, almost certainly Daley Blind, although he does sometimes play as a central defender. Right back, almost certainly Denzel Dumfries. Defensive midfielder Tun Cooper-Myers, we have him as likely to make the cup, but I shouldn't have brought him up because he's not. We don't have him as a starter. However, in central midfielder, we have Frankie de Jong as a definite starter there, as a definite candidate to make the cup and as a starter. Giorgio Wijnaldum is injured. He probably would have been a starter, either in the central midfielder or in the attacking role. He moved back during World Cup qualification to a more of a central midfield role. Left wingers, all of those are likely to make the cup. Steven Bergwijn, Noah Lang, Cody Gakpo. But we can't put a finger on which of them is going to start because they've been mixing and matching so much lately. However, we can say that Steven Berghuis will be a definite starter, but difficult to say if he's going to be kind of a right forward and attacking right winger, or in central defense where he has been playing, central midfield where he's been playing recently. David Klaassen was also moved back to play more central midfield in recent times, but we have him as a definite starter. Is he a starter? I didn't know we put him as a starter there. Anyway, and then as a forward, Memphis Depay is the only one we consider a starter, but there are a few likely or possible candidates who will be on the squad and possibly a starter, but more likely as a substitute. All right. So a bit hard to tell, and maybe we can give some clarification when we see who starts their games between now and our update podcast in November. So thanks very much for listening. Keep in mind, yes, we will be doing that update in November. And meanwhile, keep an eye on us at Soccerphiles Canada. We have done one look at Netherlands team, and you can find the link to that in the show notes along with other links to relevant podcasts. Or you can look at our whole library at soccerphiles.captivate.fm, or just type Soccerphiles into Google. That Soccerphiles with a PH in the middle and an S at the end. We are Soccerphiles Canada, so I hope to see you in our next podcast. Bye-bye.